This is just a quick video I wanted to make about why I think the final episode, the finale of The Boys Season 3 was very disappointing. First off, Homelander and Ryan. Kinda weird how it took one little, "see, I understand what you're going through," to sway the kid, but then again, what do I know? All I remember is that he was making Lego little animations on YouTube, and by the end of the episode, he smiles when he watches his dad laser a protester. More on that later. Honestly, I'm making a whole video about Black Noir as a character, and so this should just go without saying, is I knew he was probably going to die this episode, but why did they have to handle it in like the lamest Game of Thrones-esque shock value pointlessness ever? Like, we should have this whole season developing Noir as a character outside of him just being a background comic relief murder machine, and then just kill him in the first 10 minutes of the episode. Like, sure, the guy may have survived all these crazy-ass explosions and having a piece of his brain beaten out of his skull, but then I guess getting donutted and then disemboweled kinda, I guess, how are you gonna come back from that? I don't know, he has a healing factor. Maybe he's a bit like Deadpool. Probably not, though. I think it was a horrible decision the way they went about killing him. He didn't even get to do anything. He just kind of died in a pathetic-ass way. It was just sad, really, but not in like the kind of way they were trying to go for. It was sad that they thought that that would be like more emotional than it actually was. It was just frustrating to watch. They could have had his cartoon characters telling him to get back up and put his insides back inside him, but no, they're just like, oh, you're going to be in the arms of Christ, just to add further insult to injury. Very lame, and I wasn't happy with it. I mean, I'm not going to defend Black Noir being essentially Vought's key enforcer who's probably killed fucking countless people, but in the 80s, he didn't even want to be the silent ninja. He tried to break out of that, and then what did that get him? The shit getting beat out of him by fucking Supernatural. And I mean, Homelander killing him over the lie was even kind of over the top for Homelander. I mean, he understands Noir can't communicate normal. He can see through the mask. He can see that he's all fucked up. And in the end, he told the truth. And it honestly just felt like it was all just for that moment when he berates A-Train about killing one of his own so that the camera could pan to Noir's helmet to be like, look, Homelander is a hypocrite. It's like, well, we fucking knew that. He's that and worse. He killed Supersonic. I think he's killed a couple other soups. I don't know, it just felt weak. I'm going to stop harping about the whole Black Noir thing. It was such a bad writing decision that it has me hoping for an even worse writing decision of them bringing him back to give him more story, like to, maybe make his whole arc kind of meaningful in some kind of way. I know he was just a background character. That's probably what everybody's going to tell me, but it just felt lame. It felt like they just did it to ass pull on people. I don't like Black Noir in the comics. I don't really like the twist ending they give you, and I don't really like his character at all in that. So I was pretty happy when the show came out and it was revealed that they're going a completely different direction with Black Noir. That was cool. He was kind of just this background side character who had funny silent gags and was really good at piano. But now I almost wish they just kept the fucking comic twist. I mean, this was infinitely worse, in my opinion, in hindsight. I still appreciate the character a lot from the show, but it just really felt wasted and just left an overall bad taste in my mouth. Next up, we have Butcher and Huey, and I kind of liked this whole scene where Butcher knocks out Huey and locks him in the bathroom to keep him from doing more Temp V. It's like, okay, so Butcher did learn something from the visits to the past, courtesy of Mindstorm. Maeve breaking free was predictable. I mean, I expected it. It was pretty cool, though. Soldier Boy and Billy Butcher relating to each other and having their little talk was pretty good, too. I mean, it went on longer than I would have liked, but it was good. No problem there. It actually added a lot to Soldier Boy's backstory. It showed us why he took the Compound V test in the first place, and it was just to impress his dad, which of course failed. But I think this scene also serves as showing that Butcher sees a lot of himself in Soldier Boy, and that comes into play a little bit later on. There's also that scene I already mentioned a little bit where Homelander comes in and puts Black Noir's mask on a table, and he makes Ashley take off her wig, revealing to all of us that, of course, she's bald. The actress who plays Ashley does a fucking great job. I just want to say, she's awful and you want to hate her in the beginning, but at this point, she's kind of grown on me. Like the actress who plays Starlight, she also had a part in Jessica Jones. She played a weird neighbor. Next, we've got a scene where Butcher is contemplating taking his last dose of Compound V, or Temp V, or V24, or whatever they're calling it, until Maeve shows up knocking on his door with the rest of the boys. And there's this really funny scene where Maeve just broke out of her imprisonment and is sitting in Mother's Milk's house with her foot on his table, her disgusting ass feet, and he's just looking absolutely disgusted. I thought that was really great. But I'm sure folks like Miyazaki and Tarantino liked it for different reasons, and more power to them. But they show up with this Russian nerve agent that can knock out Soldier Boy, and they're like, oh, okay, we're going to take him out this way, and Butcher still wants to take out Homelander, so there's a disagreement. Maeve throws the insanely deadly nerve agent, several blocks away. Who knows where it landed? Who knows if it landed in some normal person's house and just took out a whole family, or maybe a whole apartment building? Who knows? Maeve may be responsible for the deaths of at least a family. And people will say, oh, Black Noir murdered a lot of people. Yeah, well, not as frivolously as throwing a goddamn insanely deadly nerve agent out a window to God knows where. It just seemed a little careless to me is all. But anyway, Maeve teams up with Butcher and they imprison the rest of the boys in a safe. He knocks the power out so Starlight can't break free easily. And Maeve, Soldier Boy, and Butcher all depart to go take out Homelander. And Starlight tries to stop Maeve, but once again she's punked by another female superhero. Mainly because of her morals. Meanwhile, around this time, Homelander sends the Deep to go take out Newman's political rival so she could be the running mate for the future president. Basically just honoring his end of the deal with her. There's a lot of great stuff throughout the episode between individual members of the boys. And of course, almost every scene with Anthony Starr as Homelander is fucking brilliant. But arguably the biggest moment of the episode is the confrontation between Homelander and Soldier Boy. So the trio of superpowered burnouts all track Homelander to Vought Tower, where Homelander tearfully meets his father for the first time face to face, after first announcing that he had killed Noir for not telling him about Soldier Boy being his father. See, Homelander thinks that Soldier Boy will respect him just because he's his son, his flesh and blood. He doesn't understand the concept of how men like Soldier Boy and Butcher came up, although there is a bit of a parallel, as Soldier Boy only took Temp V to impress his dad, and his dad was disappointed anyway. But that's why he had hoped to make his own children better, and to raise them, his version of what better is, before basically telling Homelander that it's too late for him, that he's already a sniveling little bitch. And to the surprise of absolutely no one, a disappointment. But not before Homelander brings out Ryan the plot device. Basically just trying to tell SB, hey, you have a family, I've always wanted a dad, I need your approval, and Soldier Boy basically shatters his whole world. Honestly, this whole situation must have been a whole shock for Soldier Boy. To meet his son, learn he also has a grandson, and then in the same instance learn it's too late for both of them, and that he has to kill them and start over. Think back to how just last week, Homelander was threatening Maeve and saying he was going to harvest her eggs so he could replace Ryan, essentially, and make a new super kid. A lot of parallels this episode. So after this touching heart-to-heart from father to son, Maeve, Soldier Boy, and Butcher all go restrain Homelander. Ryan tries to fight him off, but Butcher tells him to just stop trying and get out of there, before Soldier Boy swats his little ass into a bookshelf. Homelander immediately goes to his son to see if he's alright, while Soldier Boy charges up his beam to kill them both. Now here's where it gets interesting. They're saved by Butcher of all people. And good old Homie and Butcher have a little moment where they dual blast Soldier Boy through some glass with their laser vision. That scene alone is kind of one of the highlights of the episode for me. And I'm glad they didn't overdo it by having the two of them team up and fight SB. Instead, Maeve takes her shot and starts fighting Homelander, while Butcher fights Soldier Boy. I know a lot of people wanted Homelander versus Soldier Boy or something different here, but I think this fight is a lot more fitting. I mean, this way Butcher gets to take out some of his own aggression that he has against himself on someone who's superpowered and is basically just like him, sort of like a dark mirror image. Highlighted best when Soldier Boy is completely shocked by the fact that Butcher wants to protect this kid despite the fact that Homelander fucked his wife. So good old Butcher Boy gets to work out some of those issues we saw highlighted in the Mindstorm vision trip But eventually Butcher gets overwhelmed and is about to be probably beheaded by SB before the rest of the boys show up and save him, and then it becomes this kind of like free-for-all fight. And likewise, Maeve gets to work out all of her pent-up aggression that she's had towards Homelander for probably decades of putting up with this shit. The dude did like out her on live TV. So they get their little extended fight sequence. Although the fight kind of made Homelander seem a lot weaker than we had previously thought. I mean, she draws blood from him. Now, I don't know much about DC Comics, but I know that Homelander is essentially Superman, and Maeve is more or less Wonder Woman, and I don't think even on Wonder Woman's best day she'd be able to draw blood from Superman without kryptonite being nearby. So maybe because of Homelander's emotional state, he's just physically weaker because of it. Literally, his emotions could be his kryptonite. It's also possible that he's not taking the fight that seriously and she's taking it 100% seriously. I mean, he does gouge her eye out after she draws blood. Meanwhile, Kimiko gets a nice little scene where she gets to eliminate a fuckload of Vought red shirts, although Frenchie does catch a bullet in the process. Nothing fatal though. Before it cuts back to the boys versus SB and Butcher punches the shit out of Soldier Boy's shield, obliterating it. That's probably my other favorite scene of the episode. I just love watching Captain America Analog's shield get destroyed. Huey flips up all the lights and turns everything to the max setting, I guess. I'm not quite sure how all that works, but I don't work in at a TV station. But he does this so Starlight can turn into Hyper Electro, so she could give one big powerful blast that really just kind of knocks Soldier Boy on his ass, and then he gets right up. It's kind of goofy if that's all she had. But this allows Mother's Milk and everybody else to restrain him and knock him out with the Novichok gas, or nerve agent, or whatever it is, that Frenchie had time to whip up another batch of in the Vought chemical lab, while being attacked by the red shirts that Kimiko was killing. One thing I left out that's really good was the fact that Huey found a vial of Temp V and he kept it to himself, and when the time came that he was going to end up using it, he instead did the aforementioned light trick with the studio equipment. Which is something I think most sane people would do too when they know that taking the Temp V would be sure death. Unfortunately for everybody, Soldier Boy starts glowing because he really does not want to be put to sleep again. Back to the fight with Homelander and Maeve. She's managed to stab Homelander in the ear with something, again making me question his exact power level. I thought he was bulletproof and his skin was made of steel. How is he bleeding? How did that thing not just break when she tried to stab it into his ear? I don't know. I mean, earlier in the season, Maeve herself didn't think she would last long against Homelander at all. She thought she'd give Butcher an opportunity. But again, this could be all chalked up to the fact that Homelander really isn't trying to fight her. But Dean Winchester is going nuclear, so they'll have to stop him, and everybody takes a long look at each other and is like, well, what are we going to do now? Starlight looks at Maeve, Maeve looks at like Butcher. It's a whole long drawn out thing, but Maeve tackles Soldier Boy out of the building and he explodes mid-fall. And, you know, Maeve is seemingly dead and Soldier Boy is seemingly dead. You know, we don't really know yet, but spoiler alert, neither of them are dead. After the fighting is over, Butcher goes to Brian and asks him if he's alright, and Ryan's looking over at Homelander and wants to go with him. You know, again, to the surprise of absolutely no one, this kid has based his entire perception off Butcher off of one bad day, and his entire perception of Homelander off of several bad days and one moment of understanding. I guess I can't expect much of a little kid, though. They're all idiots. I could also be wrong here, and Ryan could be doing this just to protect Butcher. But who knows? I'm pretty sure the kid knows that his mom definitely wouldn't have wanted him to go with Homelander. But as good old homie puts it, what do they know? They're humans. Mud people. Not golden gods like them. After the kid leaves with Homelander, Butcher finally begins to feel some of the unwanted side effects of using Temp V, and he passes out. Then we get a whole faux memorial to May that Vought has cooked up. They all actually think she's dead because Ashley deleted the footage of her surviving. The rest of the episode is mostly just character scenes. MM and his daughter, Butcher at the hospital learning he's got 12 months to 18 months to live, and of course the whole scene about Maeve's survival and her being depowered and missing an eye, but she's altogether happy because she lost her powers and that's what was dragging her down all her life. I mean, she could have kept her powers and still just faked her death, but I guess this works so she doesn't have to, you know, withhold any strength and not accidentally break, you know, her wife in half or whatever. So Maeve gets a happy ending. She gets to retire and all that, and I don't really have that much of a problem with it outside of the fact that she just frivolously tossed that nerve agent out the window at the beginning of the episode. And my main problem with her fight with Homelander was because they'd hyped Homelander up so much, and she herself only thought she'd last a couple seconds against HL. And instead, she kind of gave him the business. She was, making him bleed. She was knocking him to the ground. So I don't know if it's inconsistent writing or just that Homie was holding back. We get a scene of Mallory watching Soldier Boy be put on ice again, and a scene of the Deep stress eating while his now ex-wife is doing her book, which is an expose on living with him. Now, I don't know if this is foreshadowing, but I definitely think that there's going to be a fat Deep next season. Sort of a parody on Endgame's Thor. And Starlight, of course, gets rid of her costume, which partly is because she had to, because Vought owns the rights to her character, and also because, as she puts it, she doesn't need it. The rest of the boys have joined together at the old building they worked out of, and Butcher shows up looking like absolute shit. And they see that Newman is now the new running mate for the future president of the United States, Robert Singer. Or as I like to call him, the guy from Deadwood and Justified. But Butcher and the boys resolve to take down Newman, which will likely be at least somewhat of a plot point next season. They kind of did a bait and switch. They made it seem like she was going to be the focus of this season, and she pretty much wasn't. Which is something I'm not sure I really liked. Also, there was no Cindy this episode. In case you forgot, Cindy was the character who looked like an adult version of Eleven from Stranger Things, and she kind of would just shatter people. Actually, more like she would implode them with telekinesis. Sort of like crush them. But they also made it seem like she was going to appear this season, and she didn't show up at all. And Newman was sort of like here for the first couple episodes, and then she sat the rest of the season out, just popping in whenever she felt like it. I don't mind her character, but we don't really know that much about her yet. Just the fact that she was used as Stan Edgar's weapon, and he kind of raised her like a daughter. Also, there was no Stan Edgar this episode, which kind of fucking sucked. I mean, Giancarlo Esposito, why wouldn't you just use him, even if it's just for like a couple lines? I mean, the guy's excellent. And I kind of want to know what his character is currently doing, also. I thought for sure we'd get some reference to his glorious 5-year plan, but nope. I guess he really didn't see Newman's betrayal coming, and he had no contingencies for that. So the episode closes with this scene that looks like something out of a Channel 5 with Andrew Callahan fucking clip, where there's a protest or a rally going on, and there's counter-protesters. Some are there for Starlight, some are there for Homelander. There's ones called Storm Chaser, there's one called Home Teamers. They're all either there batting for Starlight or batting for Homelander. I'm not going to talk about any parallels to real life because I find politics distasteful and just overall fucking whack. But you get what the writers were going for here. And I think it works. It's a really fitting and accurate depiction of what life would be like with these superheroes who were raised up by this corporation and, marketed to all these people. Of course they're going to be blindly loyal to them, at least so. It's going to be easy for Homelander to get these diehard fans. And it's also going to be easy for him to piss off all these other people, too. It's a whole thing. That would probably be better explained by someone else, not some guy who gets high and makes lore videos. But Homelander and Homelander Jr. fly down. Yep, that's right. Ryan's got the ability to fly now. Cut back to season 2, and Homelander just pushed him off that fucking roof. He didn't fly then. I wonder how long it's been, or how quickly he learned. Or I wonder if all it took was just Homelander finding a higher building. But Homelander and his son come down, and someone throws something, and it hits Ryan right in the face. It's pretty funny. And Homelander responds by eye lasering the guy. Now, everybody's kind of shocked at first and just pauses. Even Homelander, he's kind of like, fuck, I just did that. I can't undo that. I can't, delete people. There's cameras. I can't do anything about this. And then a bunch of them start cheering for him. And I think he looks even more surprised at first. And he's like, what the fuck? I really can do anything I want, and these people will still love me. And then, of course, it pans to fucking Ryan, who also smiles, which is what I mentioned earlier. So this video didn't end up being short at all, and the review sort of thing turned into a recap where I just kind of went over my thoughts on each scene. But, I guess it works out like that. I hope you guys found it somewhat enjoyable or informative. I mean, overall, I thought the season was disappointing. Not the season as a whole, but this episode. The season as a whole building up to this was great. almost every episode I liked more than the last, but this one was the first regression that felt worse than the first episode of the season because of everything that had been leading up to it. I wanted Butcher to get permanent V. I didn't want him to get put on some ticking time bomb to die, which I guess he could still get the permanent V somewhere down the line, but it feels like if they do that, then they'll be forced to go the route he goes in the comic books, and this way they can kind of diverge from that, because I can't see a sick and dying Billy Butcher just killing all the boys like he does in the comic books. It just doesn't add up. I don't know, I could be wrong. It just feels like they eliminated any chance of making Butcher the final bad guy. I also have expected Homelander to get depowered at least for part of next season. You know, at the end of this season, he gets depowered, and then he spends at least part of season 4 trying to get his powers back and being hated and imprisoned and tortured, having to go through some kind of physical trials and tribulations and actually feeling pain. I guess he ended up feeling pain in this episode, but he got what he wanted in the end. Well, everything except for his dad's love and respect. And I know I talked about it at length, but I really hate how they did Noir, and Maeve's survival kind of feels unearned. And meanwhile, Starlight, I mean, man, like, is her power useful or is it not useful? She did all that charging up, and all it did was knock Soldier Boy over. I will say, though, that the acting and everything else, the cinematography, I loved every bit of this season. I just had a lot of problems with this final episode. Again, I'm still a big fan of the show. I don't think it is top Peacemaker for me. Peacemaker is still my favorite superhero property. But at the risk of rambling on, I will leave it at that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please like it. If you didn't like it, please dislike it. If you like hearing me rant on, please consider subscribing. I do videos about Elden Ring and random other things I find interesting. I got a couple videos coming out regarding the boys, specifically a whole video dedicated to Black Noir. Who would have guessed I was a Noir fan after going on that rant about him dying? Anyway, though, I'll see you guys soon. Next video will either be about Ranny, Latenna, or about the Radon Festival, and then I've got some non-Elden Ring content coming along too. But also let me know, am I off base? Was this episode fire and I'm just not getting the finer points of how the story was set up, or are you in agreement, or do you have a completely different take? I don't know, share it with me, in the comments. Did you also think this episode was as much of a disappointment as Homelander was to Soldier Boy? So be safe, and I'll see you next time. I never know how to close these.